we're gonna switch up the order. I believe Stacy is gonna go next. And Stacy is a microbiologist. She's going to talk more about her personal journey as she works as a senior staff scientist and as she is having her own spiritual walk in the midst.
Sorry, I don't know if my screen is showing. Okay, great. I'll go to presentation mode. I just want to thank Cheryl and Tammy for inviting me today to present and just to be with this group of excellent scientists and researchers, educators has really been learning experience, and just the excitement is contagious. So I'm going to talk to you today about finding my passion for God again, and my sort of subtitle is what he can do with the middle-aged microbiologist, workaholic backslider, if I let him.
Just real quick, if you do swap displays, it'll show the full screen.
Okay, sorry. Is that good?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. So a little outline to start. I'm going to share a little bit more about me and what I do, and then some views I had on faith and work, because I've worked a while, as I mentioned. I'm middle-aged, so I have some experience, but some more to learn, obviously. And research I've been involved with is to care for the environment and people, moving more toward people, which is my goal. And then discoveries about faith and work, and a wrap up. So a little bit more about who am I, and also not just who am I, but how does God see me? Because I am a middle age, but in God's scale of time, I'm an eternal being. There's a quote from Dallas Willard below that, I'm his child, and that's really the perspective. I mentioned I'm old enough to have learned, a few things, but I'm young enough to apply them. And so I'm really excited about what God has for me going forward now that he's got my attention. And I'm a microbiologist, but more than that, I like to think I'm a learner, as Juanita talked about, and I have ministry in my work, which is what I want to talk a little bit about. I have struggled with being a workaholic, but I understand now more of what God has for me in balance. My work is actually worship to him if it's in balance. And in terms of backslider, yes, I have been that, but I'm forgiven and redeemed. And in God's eyes, nothing is wasted. And someone poured into my life. There's no plan B. I'm living plan A, even though I thought I might have missed it. So I just say, let's get to work. And I just wanted to share this quote because it really spoke to me in terms of just work as worship. Our work is a way to worship God, and it's from David Gibbons. It has intrinsic value, and it can demonstrate God's character when we do good work. Faith and work are to be seamless. Work is an expression of our life in Christ, and separating the two is like separating being from doing. How can I know what I'm being without considering what I'm doing? So it seems simple, but that we're designed to do good work, but the issue is that we live in a fallen world, and I definitely got caught into the aspects of that. And the way that I viewed work can be flawed. We often compare ourselves to others and think, I need to work harder, else I'm not going to be successful. And also I felt I'm not as smart as other people, but I can work harder than them. So that's where I was kind of coming from. And also some people I met were so busy talking about their faith and they weren't working, and that wasn't a good example. So my value is based on what I produce. And I think a lot of people maybe fall into this and not wanting to be labeled lazy. Again, comparing and worrying more what others thought of me than what God thought of me. And then, changing my view on that, knowing that God designed me to work, but I don't need to overwork or underwork. God works and he also rests. And he's given us a job to do. He's given us dominion over the earth. And, a lot of us, maybe we don't see our work that way, but really it kind of sums it up. So my value is based on being his child, and also, he's designed me to do good work, and also to care for his creation and to have love and fellowship with each other. And so I put a quote here from Tim Keller. It talks about, we shouldn't focus on ourselves too much. We can be more healthy if we think of ourselves less, and might solve some of our issues. But also, because we live in a fallen world, there are many opportunities for restoration. And that this to me is exercising proper dominion. And I'll focus a little bit on some work have been involved with in terms of contaminated environments, which affect public health, and then sickness and disease, both bioterrorism and public health threats. And I like how Tammy and Cheryl organized this session, because, the theme of Compelled by Hope is our research efforts are really hopeful actions. And Juanita shared this as well, as we restore what is damaged and repair what is damaged. Others are more creative. I'm focusing a little bit more on fixing the problem. So one area is where I could do research to care for the environment, is looking at nitrate contamination, which you may be familiar with. It's more of a problem for pregnant women and young infants. Blue baby syndrome can be caused by high nitrate levels in water, and these can come from animal feedlots, which is a real concern in California. And there's also increased cancer risk. So we looked at monitoring groundwater systems to make sure nitrate was being converted, denitrified, and it wasn't impacting drinking water. And there's a lot of really cool technologies at the lab that came to bear beyond my area, and more in the chemical sciences. And another area was looking at reuse of wastewater, because in California, water is at a premium. We have drought often, and how can we use other water supplies, wastewater, for uses like irrigation? And how can we use it safely? Because there could be these estrogen-like compounds or EDCs that can cause health effects. And so we looked at monitoring using a cell-based assay, and also the lab chemists had done age dating to show that it's not the impacts weren't happening. The age date groundwater is much older, showing that irrigation wasn't impacting drinking water. And then the other area is leaking underground fuel tank sites, where we're monitoring for contaminants that are from gasoline or from additives. And these are things that can cause cancer as well. And so we're monitoring for their presence, either by microbial processes or chemical detection methods. And so then my interests there have moved on more, as I mentioned, more to public health threats, but the lab focuses on national security. So bioterrorism threats are a real concern. And after the anthrax attacks, a lot of our team looked at different ways. How could we, if there was another attack, how could we respond more quickly? And it took months and months for the Hart building to be cleaned up. But what if the subway was impacted, or the hospitals, or just the community in general has an impact? And so sorry. And so, just wanted to make sure that if something happens, it wouldn't shut the city down. So we did work to look at all aspects of the problem, from pre-planning for an attack to cleaning up using fumigation or other decon technologies, and then also to detecting whether there are live spores present, and whether that's the area I worked in, to develop more rapid methods to make that determination. And so I showed just some other areas we worked in as plague, if there was a plague outbreak or Francisella outbreak, which is also rabbit fever, whether we could do mitigation more quickly and therefore open up places safely. The focus is really on public health and lives being saved, but the background of that is making sure the environment is safe to move into. And just real quick, we also have methods if there's a ricin attack. How can we, detect that ricin is cleaned up and it's not a further health threat? And so fortunately, we were available because we have this kind of background in biothreat space, that when COVID happened, we could mobilize and apply some of our methods to do more rapid detection for SARS-CoV-2. And these aren't swab samples, they're environmental surface samples. But these methods could also be used for surveillance, epidemiology, or even for antiviral drug screening. And so what we're interested in is moving more towards, in the future, being more like Tomas talked about, being ready and learning from what had happened before, because there will be other threats. There's a whole field in wastewater monitoring that CDC and EPA were involved with. And could we use some of those same approaches to monitor now for the next threats? And so I think while this was going on, though, a lot of really cool research projects, I'm also a believer. So, how did those two worlds mix? I usually kind of kept them separate, but God was really trying to get my attention. And some of the areas he used were perspectives, which really showed me that we all have a mission. We all have a role in his plan to redeem mankind. And that includes all of us. And it includes us at work too, where we spend a lot of our time. And another ministry or opportunity was simply the story where God's word just really became alive to me. It wasn't just, the stories I had heard before. They became new to me in a way. I discovered truth by asking. These are questions that you ask when you really look at a story, is what can I learn from each character, each person in the story by what they either did or said? And then what could we learn from what they could have done differently as well? And ultimately, what do we learn about God in the story, even if God isn't mentioned in the story? And it doesn't involve any memorization, but I still remember these stories, and I'm not doing it justice, but I just really wanted to mention that as one of the things. And then, so another way that really got my attention was, is it still okay? Is it too noisy?
It's fine, Stacy.
Okay, thanks. So work is not about projects, but it's about people. And this is why I say how God got my attention the hard way, because I really needed a lot of my research projects, pretty much all of my research projects, to go away. I went on assignment to DC because my husband went on assignment, so our family went. And all my projects had to go away. And I wasn't really excited about that because they were my value system, right? And so then when I got there, I still had work to do, but it was working with people. I was working a project. It wasn't a project really, it was just the work people did. And I did that for about 1.5 years. And I needed that to really change my thinking that the work is about people. And then when I came back to the lab, I would get one project and then another. And then I felt the test coming. Am I going to value people or am I going to value the project? And I would see that if I valued the project, it didn't go well. The pressure I felt, trying to, limited money, limited time, I would push that onto people, and it was all about the project. The project would still get done whether I valued people first or not. But the project would go so much better when I put the value on people. And I'd say the tests continue to come, and it just habits die hard. But I'm appreciative. My perspective is at least right. And the second discovery is that we can discuss our faith and spirituality at work. We grew up thinking or hearing, you don't talk about politics and religion at work, and really believe that. And maybe it's okay for not talking about politics, but when your faith is so much a part of who you are, it's like taking part of you out of your job. And we can just, we share the passion we have for research and scientific discovery and advancement. we can also share a passion we have about our faith and listening to other people's faith. And like Passion Talk says, you know, the humble dialogue that we can have, and to those that think similarly and differently. And it should be respectful and kind discussion, but we also don't have to have fear about other people's beliefs. And I think a lot of times the fear is there for some reason. It should really be a safe place to answer and ask questions. And it's okay to disagree. And then kind of aligning along with that is that work is much more than the work I do. And probably a lot of people realize this already, but it's something I had to learn, is that the Bible study groups was a way to see that. And we have an employee resource group at the lab. It's gone from a few employees to over 280, and not all are actively involved in Bible study, but we have, you know, ability to communicate, and it's our goal is to provide a safe, inclusive place for Bible study, for, you know, spiritual questioning, for fellowship and prayer. And then this can look differently. We because of different participants, we actually have outreach events where we ask philosophical or scientific we also ask scientific questions, but, you know, the intersection of science and faith, and, you know, what does it mean? You know, like, does the universe have a cause, or, you know, is there absolute truth? And people really want to talk about these big questions. And I had a lot of fear that I don't know all the answers, but, you know, now I don't have fear over that, because I genuinely want to know what they have to say, and I have things to say, and it's a discussion. And then the traditional too is Bible study and fellowship events, and we've had student barbecues, and we have National Day of Prayer. And some people are surprised that at our national lab that we celebrate Christmas, Easter, and these events. And it's just an opportunity for seekers as well as believers. And so I'll just wrap up here, and I have the end or the beginning, because I feel like in a way I'm just getting started, middle-aged, but, you know, now God has my attention. And even in, or perhaps especially in, a fallen world, that God has given us these passions that we can use for good in our work. And this conference is just very clear on that, and all the different manifestations of that. In my area, to redeem and repair, but others are, you know, to create, discover, build, advance, or even just maintain or preserve, and then to strive to use our abilities. Because I think as believers, we want to hear in the end, at least in this world, well done, you know, good and faithful servant, like Jesus said in his parable in Matthew. And work is so much more than the work we do. Like, I had to learn kind of the hard way, but, you know, it's the good way that people we work with are the more important, and the bigger purpose God has. And I just want to encourage you to consider the much more that God has for you in your work. And with that, I'll just wrap up and take any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Let's have the panelists on cameras, and we're just FYI, we switched the orders, and we're probably going to run 5 to 10 minutes over time, but I think it's really important that we have some engagement with these speakers. So yeah, let's open up the panel for people to, you can stop sharing now too.
Okay,
so
thanks. I was going to ask you.
Yeah, let's open it up for questions.
Click. Okay. I'm not sure where I stop.
Oh,
up here. Okay.
Thank you, Stacey. This was really, really nice. And what do you think? I wanted to ask you, what do you think you'll be doing differently? Like, what now that you, or rather, now that God got your attention, what's your next step in this journey?
Well, I tend to look at things now that, you know, like, question if they're from God. Like, I think I put in my abstract, I tend to say yes a lot more, but that also means I have to say no to things that I don't feel are from him, because I don't want to get burnt out now that I have this, you know, new focus. And the worst thing would be to get burnt out and quit. And I don't want to do that. And so I think I'm seeing things though that they don't take away from what I need to get done in my job. I think that's a lie I believe. Like I don't have time, and I think Juanita mentioned too, she's being available is the key. And, just seeing that if I just take a step forward and then, if it's what God wants me to do, then it all will fit together, right? Because and the strength comes from him. I guess that's the other thing. It's not if I try to do it in my own strength, I will crash and burn, but if I rely on his strength, and what helps me the most is like where I am weak, he is strong. Because in this new area, I don't feel capable at all. It's kind of outside my comfort zone, but he's just showing me that, he has this for me to do. So I don't have to fear. I guess that's the thing, even if it doesn't work, I can learn from it. I think, you were talking about that too.
That's so awesome. If you press, there's a red button that says stop. If you go to the bottom of the screen, it might show up. It'll say stop sharing. And then my question actually is to you, but also we have professors on here. We have education researcher on here, education PhD candidate. My question is to you, Stacy, but other people can. So you talk about this talk is a lot about this work and faith like dichotomy and how we're able to integrate the two. I think science is especially a challenge for kind of bringing the two together. How do we as educators, how do we teach in a way that helps people, like that helps in like science with maybe like a faith community or Christians or the church? It seems like you've brought kind of spirituality into the workplace. Have you taken your work into the church very much?
That's a good question. Yeah, I haven't personally. Maybe someone else could answer. I wish that gives me something to think about, though. I appreciate that.
Yeah, question to maybe the educators on this call, like how do we teach in a way that really engages people of different backgrounds to understand more of the science and understand the scientific method?
One of the things that I've thought about often is when was the last time my pastor came to work with me? Sunday morning, our pastor preaches about a lot of different things, but not necessarily about the things that I as an educator face or that I as a business person face. And I suspect, Stacy, the same thing, and Tomas and all of the scientists on the panel, I suspect you face the same thing. So how can we draw them into conversation by educating them about some of the things, some of the challenges that we face in our roles at work can sometimes go a long ways to spurring that conversation.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I think I often also similarly think about, be very aware that Jesus is with me at work and I bring Jesus to work and he's part of that. There's no like official table for Jesus, but he takes that space. And I think in that conversation that I have daily, I think in the workplace, especially in academia, I think I often ask of the Lord in my heart, like how can we engage others in different fields who might not know God, because I do believe that God has designed all of us to seek after something more and seek after truth. And I think especially in sciences, we're trying to discover truth and understand how the world works. And so I think for me, I kind of use that as openers and kind of icebreakers to think about, what is truth that we're seeking after when we measure things, when we find things that are precise. What does that look like? What does that mean? What does that teach us more about the world? And then in that process, I kind of like invite Jesus in or God into the conversation without pressing too much about my faith, but still kind of talking about, there are always things that I think that are not completely explainable or we don't fully understand of why science exists. We're trying to discover new things. So I think in that process, kind of inviting others kind of on that journey with me to kind of unlock and reveal things so that it's not like a dichotomy or like a tension between faith and science, but it's more how does God kind of stay in that picture? So that's where I am. Yeah, thank you guys.